It has been almost 3 weeks since the Metri TLC released. I've been listening to the community sentiment around it, as well as taking some time to play on it myself, and I think it's time I air out my thoughts on the broader discussion taking place around it, that being solo play, group play, and the game's current approach to balance. Buckle in, because it's a deep discussion with lots of factors. We'll start with Metri itself. Metri's TLC gave it a much-needed fresh coat of paint, with a more dynamic set of abilities and an active kit. As a standalone playable, its stat line gives the impression that it's balanced more as a 2.5 slot rather than a true 3 slot like Aloe or Lambio. Unlike Lambio, whose entire kit can be tailored to be providing group benefits, the bulk of Metri's group support is tied up in its vocal packages. The rest of its build options are a variety of toxin status, spammable damage, and differing mobility tools and utility effects. So, what's the problem here? On paper, all this should be working well for it, right? Well, not exactly. Metri's biggest problem right now is the other 3-slot carnivores. Aloe, Pycno, and Hats are all able to chase it down and cripple it with their monstrous stat checks, with Nasp being close behind due to its powerful turn-in-place and access to Skydiver. Because of this, there's a lot of folks that want to see Metri receive buffs to its health, stamina, and damage to mitigate the gap in these matchups, but they aren't taking into consideration the broader consequences of such a thing, that being Metri's punch-down power. 2 slots, outside of Sty and Kentro, struggle into Metri due to its reliable damage output, stall potential, and top-tier turning speed. Buffing Metri to make it play better with other 3 slots would only widen this gap and push 2 slots even further down than they are. But Zilla! Lambio is solo viable while also being a good support. Did it occur to you that maybe that's because they're fundamentally different creatures? Firstly, Lambio is balanced as a proper 3-slot, with 3,500 combat weight and a slightly higher max HP than Metri with 525. It's the fastest of the 3-slot herbivores, but still slower than all the 3-slot carnivores. However, it has a very good stamina pool, and is what we call a defensive playable. It doesn't really have the tools to be picking fights or confirming kills, but is more than capable of fighting off aggressors and killing especially reckless predators. Lambio has a much higher dependence on success in combat for survivability than Metri, since Metri gets access to things like leap as well as superior speed, maneuverability, and stamina. It is also worth mentioning that in a 1-to-1 comparison, Lambio's vocal buffs, debuffs, and heals outclass Metri's in every category, which has me thinking Lambio might be too good as a support, but that's a topic for another time. Then just buff the 2 slots, I hear you say. Well, then what about the 1 slots? What about the fact that 2-slot duos are already more than capable of taking down solo 4 and 5 slots? Do we turn around and buff those as well to compensate for the fact that the mid-tiers would be running wild? That would be what we in the business call power creep, which is a never-ending cycle I think it best this game avoid falling into. You see, this game is balanced off of a slot system. Every time you boot up Path of Titans, you have the option to group with other dinosaurs that share your diet up to a maximum of 12 slots. The larger and more powerful your dinosaur is, the more slots it takes in the group. Every time you form a group that isn't using all 12 of those group slots, you are choosing to play at a disadvantage. Think of the slot limit not as a limit, but a resource for you and your friends to use. The more space you fill out, the better your chances at survival will be. Playing solo, you can't make good use of that resource. At best, you can pick a 5 slot, but you're still using up less than half of a full composition's overall potential, just like how a solo 2-slot dinosaur is going to struggle to take down a 5-slot dinosaur. Skill has to make up for the numbers disadvantage, but in a situation where the skill is equal, the numbers always win out. It's because of this that it's impossible for any playable to truly be what the community considers solo viable without it being wildly overpowered. See Pycno as an example, but we'll talk more about him later. But Zilla, what about solo matchmaking? If you were looking to solo matchmaking to save officials, you are going to be disappointed. The game's design is not compatible with a solo mode, and the steps that would need to be taken to make it work beyond a serviceable level are too tall in order. Solo mode isn't going to get its own balance changes because that would be asking Alderaan to work on 2 different games at once. The only reason we have it is because the community asked for it. But Zilla, not everyone has friends to play the game with 24/7. To that, I say, there are countless avenues available to connect with this game's community, or the smaller communities within it. You need to accept that this game is heading in an MMO direction with a focus on group play, and if that game doesn't sound like it's for you, then it probably isn't, and you should find something else that's designed for you to play alone. Or, you can wait for the game to be finished and the single-player mode to actually have content. Choice is yours. Doubling back to the group-focused balancing, that's another reason I think it ill-advised to bring Metri up to par with other members of its slot tier. Support abilities and group buffs in this game act as what I call force multipliers. Let me explain using the recently buffed Frilled Bond as an example. One Styracosaurus equips Frilled Bond, and now has a 10% attack buff and a 10% armor buff. A second Styracosaurus joins the first, also with Frilled Bond equipped. Now, both Stys are getting a 20% buff to damage and armor. A third joins, and the buff goes to 30%, then a fourth caps it out at 40%. At first glance, you would think this increase functions linearly, but let's take that bonus and apply its decimal equivalent to the Sty's slot value, then add them together and show you what I'm talking about. Sty is a 2-slot playable, so 4 Stys are going to take up 8 slots. A single Sty with Frilled Bond has a value of 2.2. 2 Stys raises that value to 2.4, then to 2.6, then to 2.8. Now let's look at the totals. 2.2, 4.8, 7.8, 11.2. Notice how a group of 4 Stys with Frilled Bond has over 3 slots worth of added value on it over a group without that buff? Supports such as Struthy, Ramph, Lambio, and Metri operate under this same math, where the presence of their group buffs provide higher scaling value the closer their group gets to filling out the 12-slot maximum. So, where a solo Metri might be slightly more dangerous with its buffs or debuffs active, that becomes doubly threatening the moment you introduce even a single partner dinosaur into the mix. It's because of this that buffing its base stat line can be so dangerous, as it might reach a point where it becomes so potent in a group that it turns into a must-have. I, for one, am not too enthused about the idea of every group needing to have a Metri or a Lambio to be meta. With that said, though, let's double back to Metri's bad matchups and discuss those with a bit more nuance, as it is my opinion that they are the true culprits to Metri's woes and in need of adjustment. Allo received a very controversial buff to its speed alongside Metri's TLC, such that now with Long Distance Runner equipped, it's able to run down not just Metri's, but some 2-slots as well. What other 3-slot is able to do this? Pycno. Sitting at 670 trot speed and 1075 sprint speed, with a sprinting stamina drain competitive with most 2-slots, Pycno has been overperforming in its niche for a long time now, and desperately needs to be brought in line. Pycno in its current form has the best engagement selection of any terrestrial in the game, and for as much of a damage powerhouse as it is, that just isn't acceptable. Hats, of course, is a flyer, so on that front, Metri players will simply have to accept that it is a bad matchup and adapt. Every playable has their weak matchups, and Hats just happens to be Metri's. Lastly, Skydiver has been overperforming on both Dasp and Titan, and a similar nerf to the one Braced Legs received is long overdue. Before the developers even think about buffing Metri, they need to address these outliers. Allo's new speed wouldn't be such an issue if it didn't have the high stamina pressure it gets from Long Distance Runner. Increasing its base stamina drain, however, would make picking Long Distance Runner effectively mandatory, so I think the safer thing to do here is just remove the ability from Allo's kit entirely. While we're at it, how about we just remove it from every kit that has it? Sound good? I think it sounds good. Pycno needs a much more drastic change. It has the second best trot speed in the entire game, and the highest density of stamina recovery boosts in its kit of any 3-slot. It has no business also maintaining one of the largest stamina pools. Something has to give here. With its speed being a core part of its identity, and the numerous stamina recovery boosts being locked into its kit, now post-TLC, that leaves us with only one option left to nerf. Its sprinting stamina drain. 0.7 sprinting stamina drain on a 3-slot is just diabolically low. We need to increase that by at least 50%, just to start. This will force the Pycno players to actually properly manage their stamina, making them lean on that trot speed far more than they do now, while also creating windows of opportunity for 2-slots to attack and punish Pycnos during downtimes where the Pycnos need to rest and recover their stamina. These changes should not only make them less oppressive into Metri, but also to the other smaller playables that they have been bullying for some time now, which could hopefully lead to more of the player base gravitating towards smaller, faster playables again, instead of the near constant 5-slot spam we've been seeing for so long. Or maybe that's just me with wishful thinking. Anyway, that's everything I've been stewing on for the past few weeks. Feel free to leave a comment with your own thoughts and opinions, but I do ask that you try to keep it respectful, and with that, think we're gonna go to the outro now. I'll see you guys later. My deepest thanks go out to all my channel members for their continuous and generous support. As a final note, don't forget to hit that like button if you enjoyed this video, and make sure to subscribe so you don't miss out on any future content. As always, thank you for watching, and I'll see you next time.